Happy Mother's Day. So glad you're joining us. Joe and I wanted to give you a special day today by coming down to the center, and we hope that you'll enjoy seeing the backdrop that we're so used to, those of us who are fortunate enough to live here in this area, and welcome to you who are from afar as well. So my topic for the month of May is lean in. And today my topic is standing on the edge of the possible. And I do believe that that's where we are located right now, you and me. We are standing on the edge of a possible reality. Of course, there are many, many, many possible realities that we could end up going into. But for now, what I want to bring our attention to is what it's like to be open to a possible future, a possible reality that is far more accurate for how we've become than the one that we were living in before. And I brought a couple things that people have said to me throughout this last week through emails and texts and whatnot. One of the things that is coming through that many people are saying is that I actually feel a little guilty because I actually like a lot of being in isolation. I like parts of it. The other thing that people say is that I expected that this would be a high creative time for me, a time where I was doing all the things that I've put on hold because I was too busy, and now I'm not too busy and I'm still not doing them, and I feel like I'm sort of becalmed or in the doldrums. I can't seem to get my energy to go in a creative direction. And then I said to a friend just last night, you know, part of all that is because, the uncreative part is because for me, tuned in as I am to the morphogenetic field of sacred humans, what I'm experiencing is a whole bunch of racket. There's a lot of racket in the field, and it's, call it what you will, psychic racket, I don't know. It's that fear-based, unknown, freak out kind of stuff going on, and all these different guesses, and people making up stuff because they're uncomfortable, and all kinds of stuff, racket. And so we've got, you know, these things that we're dealing with, and we're standing on the edge of the possible. I chose a quote by Kurt Vonnegut. It's I want to stand as close to the edge as I can without going over. Out on the edge, you see all the kinds of things you can't see from the center. And I think part of what I wanted to bring my attention to and yours is that we are standing on an edge, and it's a beautiful, powerful time for hindsight, to turn and look back at how it was for us before we were quarantined, before we chose to be isolated, to look and see what was accurate that we were doing and what had stopped being accurate, but we kept doing that anyway, either out of force of habit or because our jobs required it or because we felt obligated to in some fashion. And as we turn from looking behind and judging and seeing what's right for us and what wasn't so right, and we move our focus to the here and now and the future, one of the things that we're standing on the edge of that is possible to see is what is accurate. What is something that we can do? What is presenting itself? And probably the master of speaking to this in our modern era is the mythologist and storyteller Michael Meade. Michael Meade has a beautiful book called Genius, and he kind of dovetails in my mind with Ralph Waldo Emerson. I studied Emerson a lot, and what Meade and Emerson have to say about looking at what's accurate and looking out into the possible is that each of us has an emphasis. Emerson calls it the soul's emphasis. Michael Meade refers to it as our genius, our particular gift that we've brought into the world. And Emerson says of the soul's emphasis that it's always right. And I believe that as well. And when I look at the great people of the world, spiritually, politically, socially, the great people of the world, I believe, have found a way to line themselves up with their soul's emphasis, so that instead of going cross-current with it, they're literally being propelled by the energy of their genius, by the energy of their emphasis, in the direction that they came to go anyway, but maybe had forgotten until they began to work with it. You and I have that same possibility. We have the opportunity to really line ourselves up as we're standing on the edge of a possible reality for ourselves, and to begin to pay attention to what our genius is, what our soul's emphasis has been telling us all along. And I've said before in services, and I want to emphasize today again, that a soul's emphasis doesn't mean it's some sort of grandiose, big old thing. It's more an intention or a way of moving, or a way of responding to the world from our deepest place. And so often an emphasis will be a style of being. For example, I've just known a whole bunch of people. The Science of Mind philosophy attracts a whole bunch of people that are very, very kind. And so that's an emphasis that goes along with whatever the soul is seeking to express. My own soul's emphasis, I discovered when I went to a very, very difficult Est-like retreat back in the 80s. I was very fortunate to be able to go there. A doctor friend of mine had gone, and he really felt it was valuable, so he paid my way to go. I pretty much hated every moment of it, but at the end of it, what came out of all of the hard work that I did during that time was an awareness that I had an emphasis, and that it was like a spectrum or a continuum, and that the emphasis could be applied in lots and lots of different ways, but that always it would carry with it an intention. And my intention has been for all of my life to relieve suffering. So you have one just like me. And the challenge is that oftentimes we allow things to get in the way of our ability to line ourselves up with the intention. And you know, part of what we do is we clutter ourselves up. That's that racket as well that I was talking about earlier. And a lot of the spiritual traditions, from shamanism, Hinduism, Buddhism, Christianity, Judaism, they all speak to this clutter in different ways, but the clutter has to do with getting distracted by different things that move us in ways away from our emphasis. So in Christianity, the impediments that are identified are very familiar to us. They are called in that tradition the 7 deadly sins, which are lust, gluttony, greed, sloth, wrath, envy, and pride. In Buddhism, they're called the 5 hindrances, and they are desires of the senses: wealth, fame, sex, sleep, food, greed, ill will, restlessness, and doubt. And in shamanic traditions around the world, there are 3 large categories that are recognized as impediments in the progress of the soul moving forward. And those are fear, doubt, and worry, kind of lumped together. Sloth and dangerous contentment. I thought that was an interesting word. Dangerous contentment, meaning we get so complacent that we don't move forward any longer. And greed and envy. The reason I bring these up is because in a time like this, where we are pretty much thrown back on ourselves, one of the things that can happen if we're not careful is we can actually indulge in these distractions, these impediments these obstacles on our spiritual path more because we're experiencing the unknown, and in the unknown we fall back on ways to not feel so uncertain, not to feel so vulnerable. So for me, I look instead to what I'm called to, what I'm called to do. And I'm asking myself questions, I'm sure you are too, questions like, well, if the edge is right here, what is possible for me? What is possible for our society? What is possible to affect climate change? What is the possibility? Can I envision it? Can I see it? And I was reminded of a story a long time ago. I told a story. I don't think many of you even heard it. And I got it from a friend. She was watching a documentary, a National Geographic documentary on penguins. And so it turned, so she's watching this story about these penguins, and they're filming the penguin mother and what she has to do to raise her penguin children. And so after the initial phase of caring for them and tending to them when they're extremely vulnerable and very young, she has to teach them how to survive on their own, how to get their own food, how to do their own stuff. And so they pan to this cliff, just like the edge you and I are standing on. Here's a cliff. And she's lined up her little babies on the edge of the cliff. And she sort of looks over at them for a minute, and then she dives off and goes into the water and pops right up and turns around and looks up at the babies as if to say, come on, come on. And so one by one, the babies, after a moment, you can tell they're kind of pacing a little bit back and forth. One by one, they dive off, and each one dives into the water, lands close to the mama, pops up, and then looks back at the other babies that are still up there. Well, the very last baby, left alone up on that cliff, he's looking at all his brothers and sisters and his mama down there in the water, and he's terrified. You can tell he's pacing back and forth, and he doesn't want to dive. He doesn't want to jump off the cliff. And so what he does instead, and I so relate to this, is he tries to like kind of put one flipper over, one of his feet over, to kind of see if he could edge his way down into the water. And of course it's disastrous. What happens is he falls. He doesn't dive, he falls onto the cliff, and he bam, 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 roll, bam, bam, into the water. And he survived, but it was scary to watch, and it was not graceful at all, and I hope he was okay. I relate to that story because oftentimes when I'm on the edge, there's a moment where I'm like that baby penguin, and I'm trying to find an easy way to leap into the unknown, to leap into the possible, and the easy way isn't appearing. And so I try to kind of slide in, kind of take one foot and kind of get in there, and it's usually not graceful, it's not comfortable, it's not really as it was intended to be. Are you like that? So what I thought about is, these moments where either we're experiencing guilt for kind of enjoying not having to do anything, kind of liking that, or experiencing kind of this confusion because we thought we were going to bring our whole self to this opportunity that we've longed for maybe years, and we're not bringing ourselves to it. When I think about things like that, I think about the baby penguin, because in a way what those things are the impediments sort of cropping up, showing up in different guises to keep us from leaping, to keep us from even contemplating leaping, to keep us from any plan whatsoever. And I had a direct experience of this that I wanted to tell you about before we close. I've been teaching a class, just finished it, by Joe Dispenza, his book, You Are the Placebo, which is one of his older books, really good book. And one of Joe's teachings, in all of his teachings, is that is very similar to the science of mind. It is that if we do not consciously marry our deeply held idea of what's possible with an elevated emotion like joy and gratitude and love, then we are run pretty much by our subconscious programming that's just automatic and kind of keeps us in the same groove all the time. So that's his teaching. And so one of the things to break that and to bring a new reality in is we begin to envision how we want it to be. We begin to envision life after we've taken the dive into the possible. And we literally invest ourselves in that possible reality, bringing emotions like gratitude and love and joy of new expression into it. So I've been doing that. And I decided that I needed to kind of up my game and do it a little bit more and a little bit stronger and a little bit more fleshed out. And so as I sat down to meditate, I'm an early morning meditator. As I sat down, my mind just went crazy. It would not sit still, not for a second. As I tried to bring it into focus and I tried to look at the possible reality and envision myself in it and envision all of you and how it was going to be with the center and all that, it was like watching a little mouse run over here, and then I'd call it back, and over there, and I'd call it back, and over there, I would call it back. And I realized what was happening is there was in me at that moment a fear of defining the unknown, a fear of actually diving into a possible reality, knowing that it would manifest itself, and kind of wanting to remain in this place of open acceptance is how I was framing it. Actually, what was really happening is I was afraid that the possible future that I was envisioning as happening right now was actually going to happen. And so maybe you've encountered that too. All of this to say, we're standing on the edge of a possibility for an incredible shift in our own lives to bring them more in alignment with our soul's emphasis, with our genius. We're also standing on the edge as humanity to change our ways, even if only slightly, so that Mother Earth has the chance to continue to heal herself, so that societies become kinder, more compassionate, and more inclusive. And on that edge, it's so important to remember, first of all, that we're not alone, that there is something within us that is always there, that is divine and intelligence and love in action through us. And it is the genius at its deep core level. It has not abandoned us, it's always there, and it is always calling us out, calling to us. It's gifted us with this life. I even found a quote. I'm not really a St. Paul kind of gal, but if you remember, St. Paul was someone who persecuted the early Christians and then had a transformation, a transmutation really into a new way where he was converted to Christianity and he began to preach and speak for the early church. And because he was a Roman citizen, they couldn't kill him, but they kept imprisoning him. And in many of his imprisonments was when he wrote letters to these fledgling little early Christian communities that were trying to live according to the accuracy of their genius as they discovered it through the teachings of Jesus. And one of the things he said to the Ephesians who lived in Ephesus, he said, "Live a life worthy of the calling you have received." And for me, this is another way to say, you can trust, beloveds, that the calling that you have, whether it is just a calling to be kind and compassionate or some really wonderful, grand thing that you're called to do, you can trust that. You've received it from something that is not of this world, but is seeking to evolve all of us and this world by means of each of us. You can trust that. And so as we move forward and as the days roll on and we begin to reopen, so to speak, to what was but isn't anymore, My intention, and I invite you into it, is to live anew, is to continually check in with my genius, to not let the little mouse of fear carry me off, and not take the time to really know how I want to be as we reopen and enter a whole new reality. As I invite you to join me in that, I'm going to do a prayer for you and for me so that I can reinforce with the intelligence and love of God, Spirit, the divine, the one, what is possible. Know with me as I know that there is an infinite power, an infinite love, an infinite presence that is located right within each one of us. It is vast and available and powerful beyond measure, and contained within this one is every possible reality that could ever exist, that has ever existed, that is existent now. It contains all things. And for you and for me, it offers that as a possible reality, anything and everything we would choose. Holding nothing back, knowing no limitation in any of us. And therefore I drop the limitations that I may be holding about myself, anything at all. Not smart enough, not strong enough, not young enough, not wealthy enough, whatever. I drop all that. That is not the truth for anyone. The unlimited power available to us simply is asking, my darling ones, what is your emphasis? What would you like to bring forth? And so I allow myself to know what my next right step is, and to move with clarity and purpose, to dive like those baby penguins into the waters of the possible, immersing myself and coming up in glory in a reality that is much more true to who I have become. I know that you too have this at your disposal and are moving in this direction, and I'm so grateful that we are choosing this reality, the reality of diving in, leaning in, welcoming the possible. And so it is. Well, I'm going to give you a few announcements, and then our wonderful music director, Amber Darlin, is going to come on the center Facebook page. For those of you who would like to stay put and stick to it, you'll have some glorious music on this beautiful Mother's Day to celebrate. So a couple of things you might want to know about. Our Women's Circle is meeting by Zoom this Friday night at 6 o'clock. The meeting is about an hour and a half long at the most. Even if you've never attended, you're welcome to come and be a part of that Zoom call. You can email me, Andrea Asebedo @att.net, and I will send you the link tomorrow so that you can participate. The meeting starts at 6. Our Mo team is building, and we are in need of 2 more people who would like to take a turn once a month, actually, on our riding mower and do the meadows that we have at our beautiful center. If you would like to be on the Mo team, could you please email info@csl-bellingham.org, and we'll get that information to the Mo team captain, Joe Asebedo. I have coffee and conversation with Dr. A starting this week at 9 a.m. And so many of you wanted to be a part of that conversation. I'm deeply thrilled. And we have way too many people to have a conversation on Thursday, so I opened up Tuesdays. And if any of you who received the Thursday link already would like to join the Tuesday group, I'm going to be doing the same thing Tuesday and Thursday, so it's not going to be it's going to be an either or rather than a both. And I'd love a few of you to switch over to Tuesdays. Both days, bring your coffee or your tea and have a seat, and I'll bring you a concept to think about. We'll chat. Starts at 9, ends promptly at 10, and I'd love to see you there if that's something that would appeal to you. every year for many, many years now, I've taught a class that's a psycho-spiritual class called Creative Living. It's a very, very small class because we do some pretty powerful work at removing obstacles that may have been hindering our spiritual and emotional growth. It's called Creative Living. There are 5 spaces, and if you would like to attend, that class is going to be starting the first Wednesday in June. It's going to be a Zoom class with 6 people total and me, and it'll go from 3 to 5 p.m. in the afternoon for 6 weeks. So love to have you be a part of that. You can email me if you would like to do that class and let me know. You know, so many people have passed from the virus and from so many other causes that our ritual team joined with Heidi Ruth, who is someone who's been presenting Day of the Dead rituals for years here. And we were wondering if we could invite you to grow marigolds this summer. We're going to have a grief ritual that we offer in late September for all those who have lost people and for those who have lost their lives in any way, but particularly with an emphasis on those who who have died alone and their families were not able to be with them. So marigolds are going to be part of our altar. We'd love to have as many as possible. Let's see what else. Oh, and the Victory Garden. If you haven't ever been to the center, we grow food for our local food bank, and we would love if you want to get involved. What we're doing is we're doing a lasagna bed garden workshop on Sunday, May 24th. And if you'd like more information on that, you can contact the center, either call them or email them, and they'll get the word out to our wonderful Carol Stegman and her Hardy crew. Of course, they'll be practicing social distancing, but we would encourage you to bring a mask and gloves. You're going to need gloves anyway, and be a part of this glorious setup of the Victory Garden for our food bank. If you have any questions at all, feel free to either contact the office or me. We love hearing from you. We miss you terribly. I hope this session of our Sunday services has been a wonderment to see our old place again. And now I'm going to sign off and enjoy the music from Amber Darlin. Thank you for being with me.